Uh, this is just some of the life of my mother in Mexico City as she was growing up. Uh, she spent her summers with her father because he never left Mexico City. He worked there. He very rarely came to Memphis. So her winters were in Memphis in school with her family there, Audio, and then Audio would take her to Mexico City to visit her father all summer long. And this is her father in Mexico City, and this photograph was approximately 1910. And here is another. He was a member of this book is called the American Club, which was Mexico City's, and he was one of the charter members, and here is a story about him as a member of the American Club in Mexico City. And Mexico City was a great hub of activity. There were lots of social activity and hard work. My grandfather worked very hard. He had a very nice home. This shows his home and mother with some of the engineers that worked for my father, young engineers. They were from everywhere, all over the United States. And this is a picture of them in my grandfather's home in the patio or the outside. And then when they went out in the country, out work on the job, this is where shows how he had to drill through the mountains in order to make the railroads. And this was in 1908 with his crew drilling in a mountain. And while he did that, of course, they found some silver. And he established 2 or 3 silver mines, which never were very fruitful for him because he wasn't a good businessman in that respect. He trusted other people, and they took him away from him. After he passed away, when Mother went down to see if these silver mines in which she had the controlling stock, they were non-existent and already belonged to somebody else. So, but that's gone, so whatever. Then this is Mother out on the job, living from a big home in Mexico City to a tent, working with her father. And this is a young man, one of the engineers. And I believe Mother has a gun on her hip there, if she does. That's kind of for show. She didn't really need it because she was well protected, but she tried to put it on. She liked to do that. And so they would live very simply out on the job, and she'd go and spend several days with him and then go back in the city. Now, in the city, there was a tremendous amount of social activity. And one of the things, of course, was everybody loved to go to the bullfights. And this is one in 1901. This is one of the bullfights. And Mother didn't like the bullfights because she thought they were very cruel. And it upset her, the cruelty to the animals. But she loved the social life, and they had enormous parties. And I remember her telling about one. She was probably one of the only young white girls in the dating age. And so they'd all wanted to invite her to the party so they could show her off. And this host sent around a carriage pulled by 4 horses, and the carriage had all the appointments inside were solid gold. The doorknobs, everything was solid gold, and the seats were all velvet. And he had the footman, he had 2 footmen that would drive it, and they had uniforms with the epaulets and the gold and high hats and just real fancy. And she would be taken to the ball, to the dinner, at his home, which was really a palace, a hacienda, but like a palace. And she said to have 50 or 60 guests at a dinner party was not seated guests, and was very normal. And they would have a footman behind every 2 chairs to be able to seat you, and he'd stay there to serve you. And then at every lady's seat would be a flower for her to put on or carry or wear, and a gift. And the gift was either gold or silver, and it would be a bracelet, or it would be a compact, or a mirror and comb set, just something very feminine, sometimes even perfume, a perfume bottle. But every lady would have one of these little token gifts at this area. The men had nothing but to be able to look at the pretty ladies. And she remembers that the parties were very extravagant. And she recalls one ball where my father was courting her and came to Mexico City to see her. And they went to this ball, and he sent her this beautiful bouquet of flowers ahead of time, which she carried in with her. And he always swore that she took them and threw them in the corner so she could go dance. And she said she did not. She said she set them on a chair temporarily. He said, no, you threw them in the corner and I'll never give you any other flowers. That was the end of that. No more flowers. But anyway, he went back and he pursued her there, and he also pursued her before they married. He followed her. She went to Europe with her Aunt E.O., and he went over on the next boat. Wow. And in courtship, he went over there to ask her to marry him, and she did agree. And she and Aunt E.O. thought, oh, wonderful, we're going to have a male escort to take us to all of the operas and the balls and everything while we're sightseeing here in Italy. But as soon as my father, being the businessman, as soon as he gained her agreement to marry him, he turned around and caught the next ship, went back home, left him.
My goodness.
But anyway, back to Mexico City. Mother went from the, as I said, from the farm, the rugged, out on the site of the mining and the railroad building, to the parties in the city. And her Uncle Tom was an engineer, and he came from the States down to work for my mother's father on the railroads. And Uncle Tom was a hard worker and a wonderful man. And his wife was Aunt Margaret, and she had 2 daughters, Margot and Shelby, that grew up there in Mexico. But Aunt Margaret was very much the social person, so she started giving big parties. And one of the memorable ones that Mother spoke of was some friend of theirs from the United States had been captured by the dictator who was Diaz, D-I-A-Z. He was dictator from 1876 to 1911. And he lived right across the square from where my father and Aunt Margaret and all of them lived. And she gave this big party and invited him for the sole purpose of convincing him to let this person go free. And she succeeded. This person was freed the next day. He was always flattered by a woman who'd pay him a lot of attention. Diaz, like all men, he was very flattered. So he gave her her wish. And Margot and Shelby later, as they grew up, they moved to the States and lived in New York. And they never married, either one of the daughters, beautiful daughters, never married. And they sent me this gift, which Aunt Margaret, that's the crest of Mexico. And Aunt Margaret had admired this on an officer. He carried this over his shoulder, and inside he would put his cartridges, and it was just a case. And so Aunt Margaret asked her, said, I'd love to have that to hold my cigarettes. So he took it off and gave it to her. So for years she carried her cigarettes in this case around with her. And then Margot and Shelby, her daughters, sent it to me as a gift, which I was very thrilled to have it because it was another link to Mexico City. And I think that's basically, I think that's pretty much all I can think about right now about Mexico.
Great.
That covers it pretty well.
Yeah.